I want you to picture a country with the population of, say, Japan saw, over 100 million people.
Huge country.
Huge. And it's this massive economic engine. It's growing fast, building factories, modernizing its cities. But, and this is the key, it has one critical design flaw. It has no coast.
Which means it has no independent way to get to the sea.
To the rest of the world.
Right. No beaches, no ports, no direct access to the open ocean. So to get anything in or out, I mean, whether that's a new car, a bag of fertilizer, or a container of coffee beans, this country has to ask its neighbor for permission.
And pay them for the privilege, of course.
We are talking, of course, about Ethiopia. And the neighbor holding all the keys to the gate is Djibouti. Now, for years, this whole arrangement has been, well, let's call it stable. Expensive maybe, but stable. But recently, Ethiopia decided to, upgrade its internal engine. They wanted to modernize how they handle their own logistics.
And that is precisely where things went off the rails. Or, maybe more accurately, where they just hit a wall. Because when Ethiopia tried to change its own rules to make things more efficient, Djibouti effectively said, not so fast.
Right.
And now we have a standoff, we have a deadline ticking down, and we have what our sources are calling a direct threat to a trade lifeline.
And it sounds dramatic, but lifeline is absolutely the right word here.
Right.
We aren't just talking about some bureaucratic delay. This is a fundamental conflict.
Between what?
Between a landlocked nation's desire for economic sovereignty and a coastal nation's desire to control its territory and, its revenue streams.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack this deadlock. We've got a stack of reports here, specifically looking at a ban issued by the Djibouti Ports and Free Zones Authority. Why is a piece of paper causing a diplomatic crisis? Why are 6 new companies just stuck in limbo? And does a landlocked country ever really control its own economy?
It's a fascinating and very real case study in power dynamics.
Okay, so let's start with the status quo. Before we get to the ban and the crisis, how is Ethiopia moving its goods until now? Because my understanding is that for a very long time, it was pretty much a one-man show.
It was. For decades, the Ethiopian logistics sector was just defined by a state monopoly. You had one giant entity, Ethiopian Shipping and Logistics, ESL.
So if I'm an Ethiopian business owner, let's say I'm exporting textiles, I had no choice. I just had to use ESL.
Pretty much. ESL controlled the shipping, the trucking, the forwarding, the whole chain.
Yeah.
And, while monopolies offer us certain kind of stability because you always know who to call,
They aren't very efficient.
they are rarely incentivized to be efficient because they don't have to be.
Right.
The complaints from the private sector were constant: high costs, slow turnaround times, a lack of specialized services. The logistics performance index for Ethiopia was lagging. It was falling behind its neighbors.
And when you're trying to become a manufacturing hub, which is Ethiopia's big goal, you just cannot afford to have your supply chain be the bottleneck.
Yeah. That is the economic reality. You can build the best factories in the world, but if you can't get the raw materials in or the finished products out cheaply and quickly, you're dead in the water.
Okay, so the Ethiopian government saw this problem.
They did. And under the current administration's reform agenda, they decided to break it open, to liberalize the sector.
Which brings us to March 2024. What exactly happened?
The Ethiopian Maritime Authority issued licenses to 6 new operators. And these weren't just, trucking companies. They were licensed as multimodal transport operators, or MTOs.
So multimodal. Let's just make sure we're all on the same page. This is different from just hiring a guy with a truck.
Oh, very different. A multimodal operator is a company that takes legal responsibility for the goods across at least 2 different modes of transport.
So ship and truck. Or ship and train.
Exactly. They issue a single contract to the customer. It's a door-to-door service.
Which is just standard practice everywhere else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I order something from Amazon, I don't hire a separate ship captain and then a delivery driver. I just pay for shipping.
That is the global standard. And these 6 new licenses were a really big deal. They included joint ventures with major international logistics players. The whole idea was to inject competition into the market.
Sure. If ESL has to compete, prices should go down and service should get better.
That's the theory, a textbook modernization play. You open the market, foreign investment comes in, efficiency goes up, and everybody wins.
In theory.
In theory, yes. And for the first few months, there was a lot of optimism. These companies started setting up shop, investing capital, hiring people. They were getting ready to handle a huge chunk of Ethiopia's trade.
But there's a catch. And the catch is that all this liberalization was happening inside Ethiopia. But the ocean,
Ew.
The ocean isn't inside Ethiopia.
And that is the absolute crux of the problem. You can pass any law you want in Addis Ababa, but the moment that cargo crosses the border into Djibouti to reach the Red Sea, you are under Djiboutian jurisdiction.
And Djibouti wasn't quite as excited about this new competition.
Not at all. In fact, the resistance started almost immediately. Even though Ethiopia issued these licenses in March 2024, Djibouti had been signaling for nearly 2 years before that they weren't on board with this specific model.
Wait, 2 years? So this wasn't a surprise attack?
It shouldn't have been, but the conflict really came to a head recently. On November 10th, the Djibouti Ports and Free Zones Authority, the DPFZA, sent a letter. And it wasn't a polite, let's have coffee and discuss. It was a firm, categorical ban.
Then what did the letter say?
It reiterated that these new Ethiopian MTOs are barred from operating within Djibouti. Full stop. They can't process cargo. They can't interface with the port terminals. They're locked out.
Okay, but I want to understand the why here. Djibouti is a service economy, right? Their whole business model is being the gateway for Ethiopia. I mean, 95% of Ethiopia's trade goes through there. If Ethiopia wants to send more stuff more efficiently, why would Djibouti say no? Don't they want the extra business?
They want the volume, but they want to control who manages it. See, Djibouti's objection is, on the surface, technical, but it has massive financial implications.
Go on.
They claim that these new Ethiopian companies are operated with something called NVOCCs.
NVOCC.
Non-vessel operating common carriers.
That's a mouthful. What does that mean in practice?
An NVOCC is exactly what it sounds like. A carrier that doesn't actually own the big container ship. They buy space in bulk on a ship from a company like Maersk or CMA CGM, and then they resell that space to their own customers.
Okay.
And they issue their own bill of lading.
The bill of lading, that's the official receipt, right? The proof of ownership.
It's the title to the goods. And here is the friction point. Djibouti is saying, we don't recognize bills of lading from companies that don't own ships.
Wait, really? Is that normal?
It is highly unusual in the modern global economy. I mean, NVOCCs are a standard part of international trade. If you go to any major port, Rotterdam, Singapore, Long Beach, NVOCCs are everywhere. They're like the travel agents of the shipping world.
So why is Djibouti drawing this line in the sand? Is it about safety, liability?
Well, the stated technical concern is liability. Djibouti argues that under their current law, they need a direct link to the vessel owner. But most analysts we've read suggest it's really about visibility and, well, revenue.
How so?
When an NVOCC handles the cargo, they sit between the port and the actual shipper. They control the data, they control the pricing to the customer, and they capture a pretty significant portion of the value chain.
Oh.
Djibouti has its own forwarding sector. They have their own systems. They likely see these new aggressive Ethiopian players as encroaching on their turf.
So it's basically protectionism.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want Ethiopian companies capturing the value of the logistics work that's being done on Djiboutian soil.
That is the prevailing view among the Ethiopian stakeholders. They feel like Djibouti is just vetoing their domestic economic reform. Ethiopia is saying, we want our companies to manage our trade from start to finish, and Djibouti is saying, you can manage it until it hits our border, then we play by our rules.
This feels a bit like, imagine an app developer who spends millions building a fantastic new app. But then Apple says, no, we aren't going to list you on the App Store because we don't like how you process your payments. The developer has the product, but the platform owns the access.
That is a very, very good analogy. Djibouti is the platform. And right now they have deplatformed these 6 new companies.
So let's look at the damage. We have these 6 companies. They have licenses. They probably have investors breathing down their necks. What is the actual impact on the ground right now?
It's panic mode. You have to remember, these companies were given a deadline by the Ethiopian government. They are required to start operations by October 2025.
That's effectively tomorrow in corporate planning terms.
It is. And to get a logistics network up and running, you need months of lead time. You need to sign contracts, book slots on ships, set up agents. Right now, they can't do any of that.
Because they know their containers will just get stuck.
Exactly. If their container gets to Djibouti, the Port Authority will refuse to release it, so they are just burning cash.
Bleeding capital.
They are. And it's not just about the money lost today. It's about the credibility of the entire reform. If you are an international investor looking at Ethiopia and you see that the government issued licenses that are effectively useless because of a dispute with a neighbor, you start to question the viability of the whole market.
It makes the liberalization look like a fake out. Not because Ethiopia didn't mean it, but because they couldn't actually deliver it.
Precisely. And the sources warn this puts the whole trade lifeline at risk. If this dispute escalates, or if these companies just collapse, it could cause a contraction in logistics capacity just when Ethiopia is trying to expand.
And we should be clear, when we say lifeline, for Ethiopia, that's not a metaphor.
No, it is literal survival.
Yeah.
Fuel, medicine, wheat, construction, steel, almost everything that country needs enters through that one corridor. Disruptions there lead to inflation, shortages, and economic instability almost immediately in Addis Ababa.
So surely, given the stakes, someone is trying to fix this. This seems like the kind of thing where you lock the lawyers in a room and don't let them out until it's solved.
You would think so. And they have tried. There have been technical committees meeting for months. There was an agreement last year to form a joint committee to review bilateral agreements.
Joint committee is usually code for, we're going to kick this can down the road.
And that appears to be what happened. The sources all indicate that the lower-level talks have failed completely. The technical teams are deadlocked.
It's a dialogue of the deaf.
It is. The Djiboutian side points to their law and says, our hands are tied. The Ethiopian side points to international standards and says, you're being unreasonable.
Which means it has to be escalated.
It has to. This is no longer a technical problem. It's a political problem.
So who has to step in?
The heads of state.
Yeah.
The consensus among all the experts we reviewed is that this will only be resolved by direct intervention between Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Djiboutian President Ismail Omar Guelleh.
It's amazing that a dispute about something as obscure as bills of lading has to go all the way to the presidential level.
It speaks to the fragility of the relationship. Ethiopia and Djibouti they're like a married couple that can't afford a divorce, but they're currently fighting over who controls the joint bank account. Djibouti knows it has the leverage here. It knows Ethiopia has nowhere else to go.
At least not yet.
At least not yet.
Well, let's pull on that thread, because Ethiopia is trying to find other ways, right? I've read about the Berbera port in Somaliland or Lamu in Kenya.
They are. Diversification is the long-term goal, absolutely. But those corridors are years, maybe even decades away from matching the capacity and the efficiency of the Djibouti rail and road corridor. For the foreseeable future, certainly for the next 5 to 10 years, Djibouti is the only game in town.
Which gives Djibouti a lot of confidence to just say no.
It does. But they also have to be careful. Ethiopia is their main customer. If they squeeze too hard, they just accelerate Ethiopia's desperate search for alternatives. It's a delicate balance.
Squeezing for revenue without choking the host.
That's a good way to put it.
So let's play devil's advocate for Djibouti for a second. Are they maybe worried that if they let these powerful Ethiopian companies in, they lose their own strategic advantage? Like if Ethiopia controls the logistics from end to end, does Djibouti just become a landlord collecting rent?
That is a very real fear, and it's probably at the heart of this. Djibouti wants to be a logistics hub, not just a toll booth. They want their own companies adding value warehousing, processing, forwarding.
Right.
If these new Ethiopian MTOs take over that entire layer, Djibouti loses the high-value service jobs and is just left moving cranes and collecting port fees. They don't want to be bypassed in their own value chain.
It was a fight over who gets to control the most profitable part of the pie.
Exactly. Ethiopia wants to bake the pie and eat it too, and Djibouti is reminding them whose oven they're using.
Let's circle back to the listener. Why should someone who isn't shipping a container to Addis Ababa care about any of this?
Because it exposes a fundamental flaw in how we think about globalization. We tend to believe that if a country reforms, privatizes, and follows the Western economic rulebook, they'll succeed. But this story shows that geography is still destiny. You can have the best economic policy in the world, but if you're landlocked, your sovereignty effectively stops at your border.
It really challenges the idea of the nation state in a globalized economy. Ethiopia is massive, 120 million people, yet its economic pulse is regulated by a country of just about 1 million people.
It's a huge asymmetry, and it creates a permanent vulnerability.
So looking ahead to that October 2025 deadline, what happens if Prime Minister Abiy and President Guelleh don't make that phone call? Or if they do, and the answer is still no.
Then those 6 companies likely fail. They miss the deadline, they lose their licenses, or their capital just dries up. Ethiopia is forced to retreat back to the old state monopoly model, or a limited version of it, and the whole modernization agenda takes a massive hit.
And the cost of goods for everyday people in Ethiopia stays high.
Correct. The efficiency gains are lost. And the signal sent to the rest of the world is that the Horn of Africa is still too fragmented for seamless, modern trade.
It's a really sobering reality check. We love stories about innovation and disrupting old industries, but sometimes the incumbent, especially when the incumbent is a sovereign state with a strategic port, disrupts you right back.
Politics eats policy for breakfast, every time.
So we've covered the history of the monopoly, the attempt to break it, the technical wall of the bill of lading, and the high-stakes diplomatic poker game that's happening right now.
That covers the landscape.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought on that lifeline concept. We usually think of a lifeline as something you're thrown when you're drowning. But in this case, the lifeline is a permanent umbilical cord.
And the question is, can a country ever truly grow up if it can't cut that cord?
Or at least if it can't choose who holds the other end of it. It makes you look at a map differently. Next time you see a landlocked country, don't just see its borders. Look for the roads and the railways leading out and ask yourself, who owns the toll booth?
A critical question for the 21st century.
That's it for this deep dive into the trade lifeline standoff. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.